part of the strategy is that before they commit burglaries, they have a jamming device that jams Wi-Fi, which then oftentimes shuts down surveillance video that's happening in your house. How many people have surveillance video that's anchored to their Wi-Fi? Most of us do. This is a statewide, this is a national issue. Most recently, there was a separate group of individuals arrested in Clackamas County just recently. We got alerted from some law enforcement professionals in California that were tracking these individuals up the I-5 corridor. They bypassed Eugene and went up to Portland and did their work up there. And so it's happening up and down, and this is one of the challenges of being on the I-5 corridor. It's an easy ingress, egress. It's easy to duck into our town and victimize our community, and then easily and quickly escape. But we're seeing this up and down the West Coast. We're seeing this nationwide. I honestly believe that this personally is a very organized ring of individuals, well financed, that are coming together at somewhere in our country. I have a sense of where that is. I'm not sure I should share that, but I have a sense of where that is. And then going and being sent out into our communities all over the country to perpetrate these crimes. I honestly believe there's a chance that this is a separate business model for a cartel type of organization.
Thank you so much for being here. I want to go ahead and thank those who helped sponsor this forum and make it possible. TAF, the Asian American Foundation based in Minnesota, and KLCC. I also want to thank all the different elected officials that came out tonight. I also want to give a shout out to the Asian American Council of Oregon and all of its board and volunteers who made this event possible. We have interpreters. We have an interpreter in the back. Can you raise your hand, Simon? So if you need an interpreter, we've got Simon back here. We also have Eloise in the audience. And so just let us know and we'll make sure that your question still gets asked. And I do want to say that the forum is open to the public. We are so grateful to have all of you here. The strong community support means a lot. Because our time is limited here tonight, we do want to stay focused on what has brought us here, which is the burglaries targeting the Asian American community and what can be done to prevent them. So I ask everyone to please respect these ground rules so we can have an informative and constructive discussion about these burglaries and how we can try to prevent more of them. With that, I'll turn it over to my co-moderator, Jensina Hawkins, so she can introduce the panel and give you some background.
All right, I'm Jensina Hawkins. For the two of you in the room who don't know, that was Jenny Jonak. We are here because of the last 2 years of the international crime ring that has been targeting Asian households. So far that we know of in the city of Eugene, there's been 22 homes of Asians broken into, burglarized, vandalized. People who are having a hard time sleeping in their beds because those beds have been disturbed by people breaking into their homes. The reason why we asked all of the elected folks to come tonight is because there's a lot of things going on that make it really difficult for the law enforcement to find these people, to keep these people, to charge these people, to do all the things that they need to do to stop these people. So a lot of what we need is support to make sure that once EPD, LCSO, SPD do their jobs, that there actually is some good things that happen afterwards. Tonight on our panel, we have a surprise for you. We have Sheriff Wilkerson. We weren't planning on having him, but I'm not sure if he offered or I shamelessly grumbled. It could have been either way. Obviously, we have Lane County District Attorney Christopher Perosa, who has been amazingly collaborative with the AEPI community. We have Eugene Police Chief Chris Skinner, who is probably going to get the majority of the questions and the pressure and the stress, but he's used to that from me because I used to be the chair of the police commission. And we have Springfield Police Chief Jamie Resch, who actually is the brand new chief of Springfield. She came from Portland. My cousin is on the Portland Police Bureau. He says she is the best damn chief he's ever had. And then we have Prosecutor Gavin Bruce, and I actually don't know what your official title is. District Attorney Perosa.
So it's not that we're trying to hide information from any of you with regard to the particular cases, but we have to be very careful about not over divulging information that could put the investigation itself or the subsequent prosecutions in peril. So with that, I'd say thank you for having us tonight. I think this forum is in many ways long overdue. It's important for everybody to understand that when any one group in our community is being the targeted for victimization, we are all under threat. And that is absolutely the case here in Lane County right now. We have, since July of 2024, to my knowledge, had a group of individuals that have been specifically targeting our local Asian population for burglaries primarily. And that is creating a great deal of concern for many of our cherished citizens of Lane County. These are individuals that ultimately are not people known to us. They come into our community for a short period of time and then they vanish. And so we don't have familiarity with these folks. We don't have familiarity with their vehicles, or even we're just catching up to their tactics and the ways that they are ultimately committing these crimes. So all that to say, we are working as a group very collaboratively to try and share information, to try and strategize how we can attack these cases as best we can.
Chief Skinner.
Good evening, everybody. For those that don't know, I'm Chris Skinner. I'm your chief of police here in Eugene, if you reside here in Eugene. I am entering my 35th year of law enforcement service in both Washington State and Oregon, and I have been here for 7.5 years. One thing that I would say is that it's a delicate conversation between safety and the perception of safety, two completely different conversations, and I know that that's both is going on with this particular group within our community. Not only are they being targeted, but they also feel really unsafe, even if they've never experienced being a victim of crime.
Good evening, my name is Carl Wilson. I have the honor and privilege of serving as your sheriff. I will keep this kind of short. I will just say that both Chief Skinner and Chief Ross do not have adequate resources. I do not have adequate resources, but we have always been very collaborative, and we have always done a really good job working together. I'm here to support them, as most of the cases involve their cities, and that we have had one that we're aware of where an individual family was targeted within the county. And I just want to say that we will do everything we can to support them and to share information with them and work with them to try to solve our case and help them solve theirs. So.
Good evening, Jamie Resch, I'm the Springfield Chief. Just prior to that coming down, I've been down here for about 2.5 years. And prior to that, I did 25 years up with the city of Portland. As it's been mentioned, we do understand that while the three of us have jurisdictions, the people who are committing these crimes do not have jurisdictions. And they go in between our areas, and that's why it's so important that we work collaboratively, sharing information and using all of the tools that we have. So I thought it was very important that you see that, the vast majority of the agencies in this immediate area are here this evening. As you hear me talk, if you hear me say reported crime, I am using that term very intentionally. Hopefully I have the opportunity tonight to talk a little bit about how important it is that we know what is happening. And sometimes crimes go unreported for some very, very understandable reasons. But when I say reported crime, I'm speaking intentionally. And so hopefully we can talk a little bit about that. But I really appreciate you all being here this evening, and I look forward to tonight.
Good evening. My name is Gavin Bruce. I'm the Oregon Department of Justice Bias Crime Resource Prosecutor. I've been in this position for just about 3 months, but I actually come from the U.S. Department of Justice, where I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office for 8.5 years, where I served as the Civil Rights Coordinator for the District of Oregon, prosecuting and investigating hate crimes across the state. And I think it's a perfect segue from discussing collaboration between the different agencies here locally, and it's why I'm here today, is to talk about the collaboration that we see between the different agencies and also statewide, because this isn't just an issue that is affecting Lane County. There are communities, AAPI communities, that are being affected in Beaverton, in Albany, and Deschutes County, and all over the state that are being affected in very similar ways. And so our job from the state is to try to be a resource to every local law enforcement agency, but also to try to be more of a global clearinghouse in an effort to try to combat this from a statewide perspective and to provide those resources from the state down to the local agencies that are really have the boots on the ground that are trying to investigate and prosecute these cases.
First question, Chief Skinner, you knew it was going to be you. Please describe the investigative process that led to the apprehension of 7 suspects on October 9th.
And so we affectionately refer to this as our Skyline 7 that were arrested most recently. This particular group, part of the strategy is that before they commit burglaries, they have a jamming device that jams Wi-Fi, which then oftentimes shuts down surveillance video that's happening in your house. How many people have surveillance video that's anchored to their Wi-Fi? Most of us do. In one particular case, we had a piece of video, very granular piece of video, with a vehicle that we thought was a suspect vehicle. And honestly, and we don't necessarily need to get into the ALPR discussion but I have to say that at that particular moment, it was a Wednesday afternoon. I was on a council meeting and a work session talking about the values of ALPR technology when we got our first hit on the vehicle we were looking for. And how we leveraged the technology is we didn't have a plate. We had a really good description of the car. We were able to put the description in the car into the ALPR technology, and the ALPR technology started giving us options for that vehicle. And then we were able to identify the suspect vehicle with a California plate after vetting a couple of vehicles that were similar in nature, but we found the perfect match. We found who the suspect vehicle with the plate. Once we had the plate, the ALPR technology was just invaluable. I'm sitting in the council meeting. We get our first hit on ALPR, and I honestly, if I could have you see what happened next, an entire detective division who was watching the council presentation, to include our special investigation unit, goes running out of the office, hitting their cars. We had almost immediately 15 to 20 police officers scouring the areas looking for the car. Long story short, we were able to vector in on an area that we thought the vehicle was at. All of our patrol staff was driving up and down streets looking for this vehicle, found the vehicle at a residence, recognized that the residence was an Airbnb. We quickly pulled back and started our surveillance, did our surveillance. I'm not going to talk about a specific tactic we used, but we started our surveillance and we were able to follow that vehicle up through the communities of Corvallis, Albany, Salem, sat down the street while they committed a burglary in Salem, alerted Salem PD to that, so that's solved for them. Followed them back to Eugene, and what we were trying to find out is with the stolen equipment, were they dropping it somewhere else other than the house they were staying at? So a stash house or a safe house. We were able to write search warrants as a result of all of that information and ultimately serve those search warrants, and we'll be able to make those 7 arrests. But it was from noon on Wednesday of that day, for the next 36 hours, the EPD detectives work every single hour for those 36 hours till we serve that search warrant on those individuals, and we're able to arrest those 7 individuals. And what was so disheartening is as we now know, it's just one wave of many, and unfortunately maybe future waves that we have to try and pay attention to. But in that particular case, the turning point for us was identifying the vehicle and identifying the location for the vehicle.
How much of this needs to be a local effort, and how much of this really requires coordination among jurisdictions or action at the state level?
Yeah, this is not a Eugene issue. This is a statewide, this is a national issue. Most recently, there was a separate group of individuals arrested in Clackamas County just recently. We got alerted from some law enforcement professionals in California that were tracking these individuals up the I-5 corridor. They bypassed Eugene and went up to Portland and did their work up there. And so it's happening up and down, and this is one of the challenges of being on the I-5 corridor. It's an easy ingress, egress. It's easy to duck into our town and victimize our community, and then easily and quickly escape. But we're seeing this up and down the West Coast. We're seeing this nationwide. I honestly believe that this personally is a very organized ring of individuals, well-financed, that are coming together it's somewhere in our country. I have a sense of where that is. I'm not sure I should share that, but I have a sense of where that is. And then going and being sent out into our communities all over the country to perpetrate these crimes. I honestly believe there's a chance that this is a separate business model for a cartel type of organization.
The question is for Attorney Bruce. Can you break down for us exactly what everybody has been asking about since they heard about this? Why these burglaries do not qualify as hate crimes under Oregon law?
I'm happy. This on? Yes, okay. I'm certainly happy to do that. So, Oregon law classifies hate crimes as bias crimes. There's bias crime 1 and a bias crime 2. A bias crime, tampering or interfering with property or property crimes fall under a bias crime 2. And a bias crime 2, in order to meet the requirements of that statute, you have to show that an individual tampered or interfered with property, inconveniencing the individual, and did so because of the individual's protected class. There are 2 very difficult issues that prosecutors attempt to address in these prosecutions. And the first is really the threshold question that is going to be the most difficult, which is theft tampering and interfering with property? When these statutes were passed for criminal mischief, which is the precursor to the bias crime 2, when the statutes were passed in the 1970s, the legislature stated that criminal mischief is not about thievery. It's about interfering or tampering with property, such as breaking a window, such as breaking a fence, or such as, let's say, harming a window or breaking a window at a temple. It's that type of action. Because it doesn't relate to theft, then the bias crimes are very difficult just to get over that initial hurdle. Now, we have not seen and I guess we've been addressing this now just for the last few years, and we're now looking at whether there are legislative fixes so that we can include theft based on or because of an individual's protected characteristics, whether that can then qualify as a bias crime. We've been in discussions with the legislature, with some of the senators here tonight, about how we can make those changes. The second difficult hurdle that we have with prosecuting these crimes as bias crimes is the because of element of the bias crime, which is we have to show that the defendant targeted the individual and tampered and interfered with the property, as is currently written, because of, in this case, the individual's national origin. A defense to that claim can be that we are targeting the individual not because of national origin, but because we know they own a business, because we know the individual has a lot of cash assets at their house. These can be defenses to these claims and can make that second because of difficult to prove in a prosecution. Bias crime 2 is a misdemeanor. It's an A misdemeanor, which means the maximum penalty for a bias crime 2 is 1 year and 1 year of jail.
No, he's absolutely right. I mean, the reality for us as a prosecutor, I've done prosecution for well over 20 years now, is that, this is a case in which we ultimately have, in the case of the Eugene cases, burglary in the first degree, which is a Class A felony that is it's the gravamen of the crime, it is the easily provable charge, and then we have this potential misdemeanor where we have all kinds of evidentiary issues.
There's been some frustration that, it's so hard to investigate and arrest perpetrators. You get them, but there's difficulty holding them. And when they're released on $5,000 or $10,000 bail amounts, which to victims who may have lost significantly more than that seems both deeply unfair and also to reinforce what Chief Skinner was saying. if this is a cartel and this is its business, it's a pretty good business model. If you can steal a lot more than that and get out with no repercussions with just a fraction of what you stole. So can you speak to why that is in our system and what you see as a potential solution to that?
I share the frustration, and prosecutors around the state do frequently. We talk about this a lot. It's important to understand that I don't have any control over a person's release from custody. I don't have the only time where I ultimately have the ability to affect whether or not the court's going to release someone or not is if I can prove to the court in an independent hearing that that person is an immediate threat to the community or to the victim themselves. I should also note that the sheriff who runs our county jail has no control over who gets released by pretrial services. So he is not to blame for this problem that we have either. They all had bail set at $100,000. Well, guess what? Their organization, or I'm assuming their organization, was able to provide $10,000, 10% of the bail set, to achieve their release. And the frustration, from my perspective, as we saw in cases involving prior AAPI burglary individuals, was that they immediately flee our state once released, and often will make their way back to wherever they're from.
It's 10,000 they have to put up. Is there any security or collateral for the other 90,000?
No.
The next question is for Springfield Chief Rush, and then I would like you to pass it to Sheriff Wilkerson, because I think this also is going to apply to his territory as well. Can you explain to us why Springfield and rural Lane County is either not experiencing or reporting as much of these crimes happening?
There are a lot of reasons why people may not report crime, and they're very valid reasons. A lot of unknowns. What's going to happen if I call the police? Who's going to show up? What police officer I'm going to get? What happens after I call the police? Not to mention some very valid concerns related to language barriers and cultural differences. Like in Springfield, we have access to language line for people who may need that assistance. We also have 2 detectives that are assigned to investigate these cases if we should get them. So that was for consistency, so that victims, if they need to, know that they're working with the same detective for each case. Another option that I would like to put out this evening is that before coming here, like I said, I was in Portland, and I had the wonderful opportunity to serve on their AAPI council there. And before I came tonight, I reached out to them, and they said if there's anybody in any of our communities down here who would feel more comfortable talking to them first before they reached out to our law enforcement, just to hear their experience about working with police, that they are more than welcome. And if we can work to reduce or eliminate some of those unknowns, then if there are things that are happening in Springfield or Lane County that aren't being reported, hopefully we can hear that. Because one of the things that I want to really stress tonight is the importance of knowing all of the information. Chief Skinner talked about how important and how detailed and how long these investigations can take. And I explain it like this. It's like writing a book. The police departments have to write a book. DA Perosa's DAs then have to tell that story. And if we don't have every page of the book, it's very difficult to tell that story in court that ends in a successful prosecution. So that's why I really stress knowing everything that's going on in our communities and finding ways that we can do that.
I'm not certain that there aren't several more of these cases in the county because they have not been reported. One of the things I've talked about in the past is that if we somehow miraculously got sufficient funding to put out a reasonable patrol force in the county, one weird thing might actually happen is, statistically speaking, crime may really go up because people will get trained then to call and report the victimization. And it would take some time for that spike to level out so that we can actually have real statistical data on where we're at. But in the county, unfortunately, the people have just been trained to deal with the loss and deal with the fear. And I hope that we can help, as Jamie said, build the trust to get a hold of us. And I know that her contacts would probably be willing to help us do all the same things. So, thank you.
One thing that's been really frustrating about these, is the fact that they are targeting the Asian American community. And I see a lot of pushback on that on social media, where people are in disbelief that in fact there's one particular demographic of the community being targeted, and they want to know why. People are more likely to believe that it's just someone that seemed to be wealthy as opposed to the Asian American community. And that's been really tough, I think, for victims who feel like part of the experience is being denied. Can you speak to what kind of stereotypes are playing into the targeting specifically of Asian Americans? And is there something we can do to push back on that?
That's a fantastic question. And I think all of us here will say, you know, from the top of the mountain, from the top of the mountaintops, that these burglaries are targeting the AAPI community. They are. I mean, it's not just that you know, the lived experiences of the victims that we see who have been targeted. It's the data. The data is showing that these are the communities that are being targeted. Whether it's because of shame, whether it's because for a whole host of other trauma-informed reasons that they would remain silent. It's events like this that help us talk to that.
One of the things that we have a tendency to do as a people is we live our lives on social media, and everybody knows where we're at any given time. Most of these burglaries are happening when people aren't home. They identify where they live at home. They do a certain amount of surveillance to see your comings and goings, understand when you're there, when you're not there. We have a tendency, and I know that my family is susceptible to this, that we have, you know, our social media sometimes announces whether we're home or not, whether intentional or not. And so they try to take advantage of that. The jamming situation this is one of the things when you're so dependent on your Wi-Fi signal, which, you know, I've got teenagers at home, you'd think it's the end of the world with Wi-Fi now. But that's one of the challenges. Before we had Wi-Fi and had all of this connectedness, there was, you know, these things were hardwired into our houses. I mean, the old school ADT red flashing light in the corner of the house, and now what we have in the Skinner household is either, you know, an Arlo camera or a Ring camera, and all of it's predicated on whether our Wi-Fi is working or not. So that's a really, really tough. That's why they're doing that, is because they know they have high levels of success when jamming Wi-Fi, so that you can't get the surveillance. When you look in this room and all of the differences that you see in this room, if there's one thing that binds us together, is we're all susceptible being victims of crime in this community. And if we come together as potential crime victims and crime victims in this room, we can come up with some of these solutions. And I think that's one of them, is making sure that we take care of each other within our own neighborhoods.
I would like to first get some statistical information about the burglaries. So of all the burglary cases in 2024 and 25, how many targeted Asian families? And also of all the victims, how many actually retrieved the stolen items?
When you think about, we have to look at the totality. We're talking about 2 years or a year and a half's worth of burglary cases. I don't know the percentage of those that have been specifically Asian American members of our community, but I can get that information for you through crime analytics. We have that. I would say anecdotally, in very rare cases do people get back what has been burglarized, in very rare cases, especially when you're talking about cash, money, jewelry. Those things are very easily sold off or disposed of. You know, for purposes of this particular conversation, what I would say is you got to advocate for each other. The victims in this crime are not great about advocating for themselves. We have some that are very good at advocating for themselves, but mostly when we start thinking about the different community groups that we deal with, you know, some of our marginalized community groups or underrepresented community groups, they just aren't great about advocating for themselves sometimes. And so we need to have meetings like this so that we give them the sense of empowerment to advocate for themselves, or find somebody that can advocate on their behalf, so that we can have that conversation. Because to, I think, all of our points, we could go down the list. It's not just these burglaries. You can go down the list of a variety of groups of individuals that underreport crime for a variety of reasons. Everything from distrust of law enforcement to the language barrier to embarrassment. You know, it doesn't matter what the reason is. The point is they get underreported. And so how they get reported is making sure that you, as a fellow community member, wrap your arms around them and encourage them to do that, accompany them, and give them a different experience with law enforcement. You know, we can never build trust in a community if people aren't willing to put themselves out there a little bit and give us a chance to prove them wrong. You know, it's like building a relationship. Let us prove you wrong about how we can try and meet your needs. And sometimes that's scary, but sometimes the way that happens is through a tremendous amount of advocacy from the community that's trying to support.